Howdy again everyone, and let's get stuck right into testing the living daylights out of Fuji's newest kit lens, the XF 16-50mm f2.8 to 4.8 RLMWR. It's been given an XF designation by Fuji to indicate that this is supposed to be a higher tier lens, as also indicated by its very slightly brighter maximum aperture than usual. Well, Fuji needed a new and higher quality kit lens, frankly, as the launch of their new X-T50 camera marks the point where their very demanding 40 megapixel sensors are beginning to make their way onto Fuji's slightly more affordable cameras, and their other kit lenses are all getting just a little too long in the tooth to keep a 40 megapixel sensor happy, and having a maximum aperture as bright as f2.8 at the wide end to f4.8 when zoomed in doesn't only give you slightly more out of focus backgrounds in your images, but helps you to better avoid the softening effects of diffraction, which kick in at brighter apertures on such high resolution sensors. Its widest angle of 16mm is also quite attractive, the full frame equivalent of about 24mm, so that's a lovely wide angle on offer here, very useful. Zooming into 50mm, the equivalent of 75mm on full frame, means you have the basic zoom ranges required for a wide range of basic photography. The lens does not feature image stabilization, but most of Fuji's newest cameras have it built into them now, so that's actually quite a sensible cost-saving measure on Fuji's part. The lens is $400 or £350 in the UK if you buy it with the Fuji X-T50 as part of a kit, which could be good value if the thing is sharp enough. When bought on its own, however, it's $700 or £700, which is expensive. I'd like to thank Fuji UK for loaning me this lens alongside an X-T50 camera for testing for a couple of weeks, although as usual this is a totally independent review and they have had no input into the content whatsoever. The lens's build quality is a cut above other manufacturers' kit lenses, although it's still lightweight at 240 grams and it's a little plasticky. The rear mount is made of metal and is nicely weather sealed, and the rest of the lens features weather sealing also. At the rear we get a plastic aperture ring with satisfying little clicks to it, and that's followed by a rubberized zoom ring, which turns incredibly smoothly. It feels quite luxurious, and that is useful for video work. In front of that, we get a smoothly turning manual focus ring. As usual for a Fuji lens, unfortunately, the focus motor's response to being turned is jerky, more so than usual, in fact. Whether you're zoomed in or zoomed out, the lens displays a small amount of focus breathing. It won't really be a bother when video making. As you can see here, the lens's autofocus motor is very fast, and it works silently and accurately. Nice! It had no problem with subject tracking either. The front of the lens has a pretty standard 58mm filter thread size, and a nice touch is that it also comes with a relatively deep plastic lens hood. All in all, excellent build quality here. The lens is lightweight, quick and easy to use with excellent autofocus. Okay then, what about image quality? I'll be testing the lens today on a Fuji X-T50 camera with its extremely demanding 40 megapixel sensor with in-camera corrections. At 16mm and f2.8 we see razor sharpness in the middle of the image and good contrast. Corner image quality is really quite soft here though. It's the same at f4 but slightly improved at f5.6. At f8 those corners are looking just about okay, but that's as sharp as they get, even if you stop down further, so a slightly disappointing start at wider angles. In case you're wondering, I repeated that 16mm test at normal distances, something I normally do if I've had a surprising result. At f2.8, the corners were still soft, but a little better than on the test chart. At f4 and f5.6 we get improvements, leaving corner image quality decently good, but not very sharp. So there you go. Not as bad as I originally thought, but still not great in those image corners at wide angles. Anyway, back to the chart and let's zoom into 28mm. At the new maximum aperture of about f3.7, we still get plenty of sharpness in the middle of the picture. The edges look softer again, but only right in the very corners, and it's nowhere near as bad as at 16mm. At f5.6 and f8, those corners look fairly sharp now, actually. Stop down to f11 and f16 for diffraction to significantly soften your image, as you'd expect to see. Finally, let's zoom all the way into 50mm. At the new maximum aperture of f4.8, we are still getting plenty of sharpness in the middle of the image, although contrast is a bit low here. Some good news though is that the corner image quality is pretty sharp, straight from that maximum aperture. Stopping down to f5.6 makes little difference to anything at all, and if you stop down as far as f8 or darker, the image just gets softer again due to diffraction. Overall, considering just how ridiculously high resolution that 40 megapixel sensor is, the lens is performing well, offering mostly a lot of sharpness. At the widest angles, you should stop down to f5.6 for best sharpness in the image corners, and when zoomed in, you may wish to add a little extra contrast to your images, but apart from that, everything seems to be okay here. So let's bypass Fuji's in-camera corrections now by shooting in RAW and look at distortion and vignetting. At 16mm we see some very strong barrel distortion here and lots of darkness in the image corners, although at least they're not completely black or anything like on some Canon lenses I've tested recently. Anyway, stop down to f4 for a lot more brightness in those corners, but at f5.6 and beyond we don't get much improvement. Zoom into 23mm and that distortion mostly straightens out. At 50mm we see strong pincushion distortion and dark vignetting in the corners. Stop down a little to f5.6 for more corner brightness, but even at f8 there's no real further improvement. So it's an ugly performance for distortion and vignetting here. Fuji's in-camera corrections are having to work hard on this one. Anyway, let's see about close-up image quality. The lens can focus as closely as 24cm, which is pretty fantastic for catching pictures of smaller subjects here. At f4.8, close-up image quality is somewhat sharp, but suffers from absolutely terrible ghosting and low contrast. Contrast improves at f5.6 and becomes good at f8, but stop down to f11 for a small improvement in sharpness, although due to diffraction you'll never see complete sharpness when shooting close up. Next, work against bright lights. It's just an average performance here. Whether zoomed out or zoomed in, we get a fair bit of noticeable flaring, but the good news is that it isn't very opaque. I've certainly seen worse than this before. Now onto bokeh. Despite having a slightly brighter aperture than other kit lenses, you still have to get fairly close to your subject for out of focus backgrounds here, but the good news is that when you do, they look extra lovely and soft in virtually all situations. And finally, related to bokeh comes longitudinal chromatic aberration. At f4.8 it's strong on this lens, unfortunately. It's still there at f5.6, but stop down to f8 and it's mostly cleared up. Overall, well, this is certainly Fuji's best kit lens, and considering it can be had for $400, it's actually capable of impressive sharpness. Well, mostly. It has some hidden issues like distortion, vignetting, longitudinal chromatic aberration, and I wish it was sharper when shooting close up. But in every other department it works absolutely fine, takes very nice pictures with good levels of detail, and it's small, light, weather sealed and fun to use. You can't really ask for much more than that at this price, so it's a nice move by Fuji and the lens comes recommended. You know what else I can recommend? That lovely X-T50 camera. Of course, I had a blast taking that thing on holiday with me, and it worked real nice with that new kit lens. Hope you liked the pictures, and if you'd like to support this channel, be sure to check out my Patreon page in the description for all kinds of extra bonus content and early access to reviews. Ciao for now, everyone.